The UK announced it will be suspending free trade negotiations with Israel and announced sanctions against West Bank settlers.
The UK, Canada and France threaten sanctions against Israel over what they say is wholly inadequate levels of humanitarian aid in Gaza.
In an interview with Euronews, EU trade negotiator Maros Sefcovic has confirmed EU standards on food safety are not up for negotiation in US talks over tariffs.
The American Senate has approved Charles Kushner, father to Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, to become the next American ambassador to France.
The UK government announced it will be suspending free trade negotiations with Israel and announced new sanctions on settlements in the West Bank. The UK's Foreign Secretary David Lammy has criticised Israel's military actions in Gaza as well as violence by Israeli settlers.
I'm announcing that we have suspended negotiations with this Israeli government on a new free trade agreement. We will be reviewing cooperation with them under the 2030 bilateral roadmap. The Netanyahu's government's actions have made this necessary. Yesterday, Minister Smodrik even spoke of Israeli forces cleansing Gaza, destroying what's left of residents, Palestinians, being relocated, he said, to third countries. We must call this what it is. It is extremism.
International pressure has been building on Israel following a nearly 3-month blockade of supplies into Gaza that led to famine warnings. The United States has voiced concerns over the growing hunger crisis, and France and Canada mirrored the United Kingdom and threatened to sanction Israel if it does not halt its offensive and allow humanitarian aid into Gaza.
The leaders of Britain, Canada and France have threatened sanctions against Israel if it doesn't halt a renewed military offensive in Gaza and lift restrictions on humanitarian aid. The news follows the arrival of a limited amount of aid trucks in Gaza after nearly 3 months of an Israeli blockade on food, medicine and other essential supplies. The 3 Western nations issued a joint statement calling the aid deliveries wholly inadequate and warned of concrete actions against Israel if it continues its latest military operations in Gaza.
It's a really serious, unacceptable, intolerable situation, and that's why we are working intensely to coordinate with other leaders how we respond to this, because it is intolerable, it is unacceptable, and we will continue to work in that way.
In response, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel would defend itself by just means until achieving total victory. He reiterated Israel's conditions for peace, which include the release of all remaining hostages and the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. Residents of Kyiv expressed little optimism about progress towards peace with Russia. Following talks between Ukrainian and Russian delegations in Turkey last week, US President Donald Trump held separate phone calls with Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Among ordinary Ukrainians, hope for a potential ceasefire and lasting peace remains dim.
Зараз це неможливо, коли вже в них не буде ресурсів, коли не буде в них армії. Тобто вони зараз готові воювати ще літом. Це вже ближче до осені можливо, а зараз ні. Він буде затягувати час і все.
Я думаю, що він просто тягне час. Хоче більше землі хапати. От і все. Він же сам сказав, що йому нужна іменно територія. От і все. А там він же ж нічого не оставляє. Вижжена земля. Розбомблено все.
Не вірю, поки такі, як зараз йдуть переговори, вже повинен був би Трамп за скільки місяців вже при владі, давно зустрітись з Путіним, а він тільки по телефону розмовляє.
Ukraine has proposed a comprehensive 30-day ceasefire, which Moscow has effectively rejected by imposing far-reaching conditions. While Trump announced that Moscow and Kyiv would immediately begin ceasefire negotiations, he gave no indication of exactly when or where such talks might take place.
Kyiv is interested in a direct face-to-face meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin, Ukraine's foreign minister Andriy Sybiha said in Brussels on Tuesday, adding that Kyiv is willing to consider all formats and venues for this meeting, as he confirmed that the Vatican proposed to host the talks.
Ми зацікавлені у прямій зустрічі президента Зеленського з Путіним. Ми чітко розуміємо, що в Росії лише одна людина приймає такі рішення, які здатні зупинити війну. Ми готові розглядати потенційні площадки для такої зустрічі. Так, я вам підтверджую, що пропозиція щодо організації можливих контактів, в тому числі на рівні лідерів, звучали зі сторони Ватикану.
The Ukrainian president also discussed a possible meeting with his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump, Sybiha said, following Trump's call with Putin, which Zelensky later described as Moscow's attempts to buy time to continue the war in Ukraine.
EU trade negotiator Maros Sefcovic has confirmed EU standards on food safety are not up for negotiation in the talks with the U.S. over tariffs. The EU and U.S. are locked in talks due to expire in early July after U.S. President Donald Trump issued a 90-day window to negotiate. Washington has decried EU safety standards on agricultural products as one of the reasons for the tariff war.
I think we've been quite clear that we clearly would preserve our regulatory autonomy. And if I follow a little bit the discussion in the United States of America, I mean, there is also lots of talk about, having healthier food, what should be, the composition of the food processing and so on and so forth. And I think we already had this discussion in Europe, and we are very proud of our health and safety standards. If it comes to food, if it comes to agri-food production, we are going clearly to stick to them.
So that's not up for negotiation, standards?
I think if it comes to health and safety issues, I mean, clearly these are not up for negotiations.
Meanwhile, the EU negotiator says he is pushing for a fair and balanced deal with the US. But he says the EU stands ready to implement up to 95 billion euros of countermeasures if negotiations fail.
We are already paying 10% tariff, we are already paying 25% tariff for steel, we are already paying 25% for cars, and we really believe that this is simply not fair. Yeah. So we want to resolve it through the negotiated solutions. But of course, we are also preparing alternative where we would have to protect the European jobs and European companies, and therefore we started the consultations on eventual rebalancing measures.
A new series of U.S. products could be targeted for potential EU tariffs, including aerospace champion Boeing or alcohol products like bourbon. You can listen to the full interview on the Europe Conversation this Friday.
Cambodia on Tuesday marked 50 years since the country's communist Khmer Rouge launched a 4-year reign of terror that killed an estimated 1.7 million people. On Cambodia's annual Day of Remembrance, around 2,000 people attended a ceremony honoring the victims of the Khmer Rouge genocide at the site of one of the most notorious killing fields, some 15 kilometers south of the capital, Phnom Penh. Dozens of student actors from the Phnom Penh Art School reenacted brutalities under the Khmer Rouge, which held power from 1975 to 1979, when an estimated 1/4 of Cambodia's population was wiped out from torture, starvation, executions, and misrule. The Khmer Rouge captured Phnom Penh on 17 April 1975 and immediately herded almost all the city's residents into the countryside. The regime ruled until 1979, when it was driven from power by an invasion from neighboring Vietnam, forcing its ruler Pol Pot into hiding.
Heavy rainfall across Spain has filled up dam reservoirs across the country, forcing some to release some of their water. El Atazar Dam Reservoir in Madrid has been releasing water in a controlled manner, but now that the dam has reached maximum capacity, it is being forced to release water from an additional spillway. The heavy rainfall is in stark contrast with last year's stubborn drought. Scientists say climate change is making swings between dryness and downpour more acute.
The US Senate voted to approve Charles Kushner, the father of Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, as the next American ambassador to France on Monday. The real estate mogul was previously pardoned by the president in 2020 after having pled guilty to tax evasion and witness tampering, for which he served 2 years in prison. Kushner was first nominated as the next American ambassador to Paris in November, with several French officials accusing the 70-year-old of lacking proper diplomatic qualifications. During a Senate hearing, Kushner pledged to encourage French investment in American defense companies and bring Paris more in line with Washington's strategic interests. Kushner's appointment comes at a time of uncertainty for Franco-American relations, as the two nations diverge over Ukraine, trade, and European security realignment.